What happens when a country music legend steps into the most combative talk show in America and decides he's not playing by their rules? What followed wasn't an interview. It was a showdown that turned live television into a battleground, leaving the studio frozen and millions of viewers stunned in disbelief. Blake Shelton walked onto the view stage that morning with that same confident, easy swagger America knows him for. The studio lights glowed warm, the audience clapped and cheered, and Blake gave a small tip of his cowboy hat, just enough to make the crowd laugh. He took his seat, calm and polite, the kind of guest who never seemed to take himself too seriously. But across the table, Joy Behar was already watching him with that sharp, knowing smile that told everyone she wasn't here to talk about tour dates. "Well, look who finally decided to visit us," she said, tone playful but edged. The voice of a very specific America. The words landed heavier than expected. The audience's laughter faltered, replaced by a few uneasy chuckles. Blake didn't flinch. He smiled, leaned back slightly in his chair, and nodded. "Good to see you too, Joy. Always a pleasure to be here with you, ladies." That easy charm might have worked on a lighter morning, but Joy wasn't letting him off that easy. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "So, Blake, let's talk about these small-town values you're so proud of. You've said before that people in small towns are more grounded, more patriotic, more, real, than people from the city." The word real hit like a dart. The audience laughed awkwardly again. Blake kept his voice level, his Oklahoma drawl more noticeable now. "I didn't say better, Joy. I said small towns teach you things. Hard work, helping your neighbors, staying humble. That's what I meant." Joy tilted her head, unimpressed. "Right. But don't you think that sounds just a little bit like saying everyone else doesn't have those values?" The air in the studio started to thicken. Whoopi tried to step in with a soft joke, but Joy cut her off with a half-smile that wasn't really a smile. Joy didn't waste any time pushing the next line of attack. She folded her hands, her voice calm but cutting. "You know, Blake, I've always found your whole small-town America thing fascinating. It's like a brand, a mythology. The hard-working, flag-waving heartland folks versus the out-of-touch city crowd. It sells records, it wins hearts, but let's be honest, it's a story, isn't it?" The studio fell quiet again. A few people chuckled softly, unsure if they were supposed to. Blake blinked once, his easy grin still in place but thinner now. "It's not a story, Joy. It's my life. I grew up in Ada, Oklahoma, population 12,000, give or take. My dad worked construction, my mom ran a beauty shop. When someone's barn burned down, 20 families showed up the next morning to help rebuild it. Nobody sent out a press release, nobody got paid. That's not mythology. That's community." His tone was steady, but there was weight behind it. Joy leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "That's a beautiful picture, Blake. But let's not pretend you're still that guy from Ada. You live in Nashville and LA, you've got mansions, private jets, and more money than most of those 12,000 people will see in a lifetime. So when you sing about blue jeans and pickup trucks, it's hard not to wonder who you're really talking to." The crowd reacted. A few gasps, some nervous laughter. For a moment, Blake said nothing. His jaw flexed slightly as he looked at Joy. Really looked at her. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, sharper. "You know what, Joy? Success didn't erase my roots. I still call Ada home. I still go back, see the same people, walk the same streets. The only difference is now I can help more folks when they need it." The audience murmured in approval. The charm was gone from his face now, replaced by something colder, steadier. Joy didn't back off. If anything, she leaned in harder. "You know what this really is, Blake?" she said, voice sharp enough to cut the air. "You're a product. A polished, packaged creation of the Nashville machine. Nothing more than a brand built to sell an image of real America to people who want to believe it still exists. The audience gasped. It wasn't the playful jab of a talk show anymore. It was a direct hit. Blake froze for half a second, then slowly stood. His chair scraped the floor, echoing louder than it should have. At 6'5", he towered over the table. The energy in the room shifted. Whoopi raised her hand slightly, hoping to steer things back, but the director in the control booth shook his head. "Stay tight. Don't cut." The red tally light glowed like a warning. Joy kept her eyes on Blake, refusing to blink. "You sing about dirt roads and pickup trucks like they're symbols of virtue," she pressed on. "But what you're really selling is fantasy. This idea that America was purer, simpler, back when people didn't have to think too hard. That's nostalgia, Blake. Not truth." Her words hit like a slap. The audience sat in complete silence. Even the hum of the cameras felt louder now. Blake leaned forward, hands pressed to the table, eyes locked on Joy. His voice was calm, but it carried a quiet edge that made every person in the room listen. "You know, Joy, if you can't tell the difference between authenticity and exploitation, that says more about you than it does about me." The line landed like a punch. For a moment, no one breathed. Joy's jaw tightened, and her smile vanished completely. Joy didn't flinch. She went for the jugular. "You're a manufactured product of the Nashville machine, Blake," she snapped, voice rising just enough to slice through the quiet studio. "Everything about you, your songs, your image, even that aw-shucks smile, it's marketing. You sell people an idea of America that doesn't exist anymore." Blake's chair scraped across the floor as he stood. The sound cut through the air like a blade. At full height, he loomed over the table, one hand on the edge, eyes locked on Joy. Joy crossed her arms, still seated, still defiant. "Your songs sell a dream that never was," she continued, voice lower but dripping with disdain. "Pickup trucks, bonfires, hard-working folks who never complain. It's fantasy nostalgia. You make millions selling comfort to people who can't afford the truth." Blake's stare didn't waver. He leaned closer, the tension so thick you could almost hear the silent strain. When he finally spoke, his tone was cold steel. "You know, Joy," he said quietly, "if you can't tell the difference between authenticity and exploitation, that says a whole lot more about you than it does about me." Joy's smile vanished. Her jaw clenched hard. Joy wasn't done. She sat back in her chair, arms folded, eyes narrowed like she'd been waiting for this moment. "You know what the problem is, Blake," she began, her voice steady but sharp. "You sing about small towns like they're perfect. Porch lights, Sunday picnics, people who never do wrong. But you only ever show the pretty parts. You leave out everything else." The audience shifted, sensing another round was coming. Blake's head tilted slightly. "Pretty parts?" he repeated. "You think that's all I see?" His voice tightened as he leaned forward. "Let me tell you something. My hometown's seen factories close. Kids move away because there's no work left. I've watched friends lose everything they had and still find a way to help their neighbors. I've seen people bury loved ones and still get up the next day to fix someone else's fence. You call that pretty? That's survival, Joy." The crowd hummed, quiet but moved, as Blake's tone sharpened with conviction. Joy waited for him to finish before twisting the knife. "And yet," she said coolly, "those same people keep voting for leaders who make sure they stay right where they are, struggling. You ever sing about that?" The words hit like a sucker punch. The tension spiked, the air suddenly heavy. Blake's patience snapped. "You really want to go there?" he shot back. "You sit up here and mock people who love their country, people who still stand for the flag, who still honor veterans, and then you call them the problem? What's fake about pride? What's wrong with loving where you come from?" His voice grew harder with every sentence. Joy's face flushed. "Don't you dare question my patriotism," she snapped, her voice shaking now, but louder than before. "I've fought for this country's values longer than you've been famous. Neither Joy nor Blake blinked. The camera stayed tight on their faces. Two worlds, two tempers, colliding in real time. Blake's face went still. For a long second, he didn't speak. Then, with slow precision, he reached up and took off his hat. The same battered cowboy hat he'd worn on every stage for 20 years. He set it right in the center of the table between them. The move was quiet, deliberate. Blake looked at Joy across the hat like it was a line drawn between them. "I've never pretended to be anything I'm not," he said finally, voice low but steady. "Can you say the same?" His words landed heavy. You could almost hear the audience exhale all at once. Joy's lips pressed together, and for a split second, her confidence flickered. But she recovered fast. "I inform," she shot back. "You numb. I educate. You distract. You sing people lullabies while the world burns." Her tone had gone from sarcastic to sharp, from teasing to something close to fury. The crowd reacted in waves, others clapped, a few even booed. Blake didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You can't stand," he said, leaning slightly forward, "that people can find joy in things you don't control, that they can find comfort without your permission." His words sliced through the noise. The floor manager finally raised her clipboard and signaled, "We're going to break." The crew moved fast, camera lights dipping slightly, but the red tally light on camera 3 stubbornly stayed on. Nobody noticed. The control room countdown started, in 3, 2, but the feed never cut. Joy leaned slightly toward a nearby producer, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the still air. "Don't platform porch beer politics," she muttered, rolling her eyes. It was meant to be off-air, just a jab among crew, but the words leaked straight into the live program feed for 2 full seconds. Within minutes, one of those clips hit social media. Captions flashed in bold white, "Don't platform porch beer politics." It spread like fire. Comment sections exploded, half defending Joy's candor, half calling it an insult to working-class viewers. Meanwhile, inside the studio, no one yet knew the internet had already picked sides. Trying to smooth things over, Sarah took a slow breath and leaned in with her softest voice. "Blake," she said carefully, "you recently helped raise millions for tornado relief back home. Can we talk about that? What that meant to you?" Her tone was genuine, an olive branch in a room full of sparks. But before Blake could even answer, Joy cut in again, her tone dripping with contempt. "Oh, please. Benefit concerts are just brand laundering for celebrities. You use charity to buy credibility." The crowd gasped. Even Whoopi's expression hardened as she turned her chair slightly away, glaring at the floor manager. Blake leaned forward, his elbows on the table, the calm in his voice barely holding. "Simple joys aren't ignorance, Joy," he said, his words slow and measured. "They're how people survive. When you're watching the bills pile up, when your neighbor's lost his job, when you're holding your breath to make it to Friday, those small things keep you going. Sitting on a porch, a backyard fire, a song that reminds you who you are. That's not denial. That's hope." His voice filled the room. It wasn't loud, but it had weight. Joy crossed her arms, shaking her head. "No, Blake. That's how people get comfortable with the bare minimum. Contentment is complicity. You tell them everything's fine so they stop asking why it isn't." The crowd reacted, half silencing, half murmuring. A few people clapped. The tension was now something you could feel pressing against the air itself. Blake didn't flinch. "You know what I've seen in those content towns you're talking about? Veterans with nothing left who still volunteer to build playgrounds for kids, families who've lost everything in storms but still donate to their neighbors. We've raised over $15 million from my last 2 tours alone for people who needed a hand. If that's complicity, then I'll take it." His voice cracked just slightly at the end, not with weakness, but with anger he was holding back. A veteran in the 3rd row, an older man wearing a worn-out ball cap. He nodded, eyes wet, and the audience caught it. That one moment said more than 1,000 arguments. Then suddenly, a wave of applause broke out from one side of the room. The other side booed. The balance of the crowd shifted like a live wire sparking on stage. Security started inching closer to the wings. The stage manager caught Whoopi's eye, mouthing, "We may have to pull Joy or cut the feed." Whoopi stayed silent, just watching the fire burn. Blake's tone went colder now, the edge returning. "I came here to talk about music, Joy. You came here to stage a trial." His voice hit like a gavel. Joy's face tightened. "Then answer for the fantasy you sell." Blake stared at her for a long, quiet moment. "You don't hate my songs," he said softly. "You hate that they don't need you." Blake pushed his chair back, the sound echoing across the studio like a warning shot. He stood tall, his expression unreadable, and turned toward the edge of the set. The audience went silent, realizing he might actually walk off. Joy leaned forward, her tone sharp and taunting. "Run then," she called out, her words slicing through the tension. "That's what happens when your fantasy finally meets reality." The smirk on her face didn't match the flicker of unease in her eyes. Blake stopped mid-step. The cameras tightened on his back as he slowly turned around. The air felt frozen. "You know," he said, voice steady, "this used to be a table for disagreement. Now it's a megaphone. Nobody's listening, just waiting for their turn to shout." His words carried through the room like a quiet sermon, the kind that cuts deeper because it's calm. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice the first sound of reason all morning. "We can disagree without contempt," she said gently. It was the first line that didn't sound like an attack. Even Joy's eyes flickered toward her co-host for a brief second, realizing the weight of what had just happened. Blake looked at Whoopi and Sarah, gave a small nod, then reached for his hat. "Thanks for the invite," he said, tipping it toward them with quiet respect. Then he turned to Joy, his voice soft but sharp enough to slice through the silence. "You don't need me to be wrong, Joy. You need me to be the villain." He slipped the hat back on and walked toward the exit. The studio didn't move. No applause, no whispers, just stunned stillness. Within minutes of the broadcast cutting to commercial, the internet had already turned the confrontation into a digital battleground. 2 hashtags shot to the top of the trending list: porch beer politics and let him sing. Clips flooded social media. One edit painted Blake as a defiant cowboy standing up for small-town America, while another framed Joy as the truth-teller calling out hypocrisy. The country split itself in real time. Cowboy walks versus host exposes myth. By noon, both sides had their own viral edits, each one cutting the same footage into a completely different truth. Then came the leak, the 2-second hot mic clip, Joy muttering, "Don't platform porch beer politics," surfaced on Twitter and hit 1 million views in under an hour. Network legal scrambled, phones ringing nonstop. The executive producer sat in a glass office drafting a statement with the phrase "editorial independence" repeated 3 times, trying to sound apologetic without taking a side. But the damage was already out there. Screenshots, captions, slowed down replays. It was no longer about what happened. It was about what people felt had happened. That afternoon, another clip started circulating, shaky, filmed from the 3rd row. The veteran who had nodded during Blake's defense posted a short, unpolished video. "His show helped rebuild our ramp, paid for my wife's meds. He didn't brag about it. He just did it." The post went viral, not explosive but steady and emotional. It didn't need edits or hashtags. It was just real, and that made it unstoppable. By evening, rival networks smelled blood. One major morning show tweeted a thinly veiled challenge: "Long form, no interruptions." Blake, seats open. The message was clear. A ratings war was brewing. Even Joy's own producers could feel the chill from the upper floors. Emails started with words like, optics, and ended with damage control. Outside the studio, Blake's SUV waited by the curb. No mic, no entourage, just a few fans who had lingered for hours hoping to see him. One asked quietly, "Was it worth it?" Blake smiled faintly, hands in his pockets. "Songs aren't sermons," he said. "They're shelter." Someone caught it on their phone, and by morning, that clip had outrun every official statement, every PR spin, every headline. Inside the studio, Joy stood alone for a long time after the lights dimmed. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened teleprompter. She pressed her hand against the edge of the desk, her breath unsteady, her expression unreadable. No words, just a quiet moment of someone realizing that the noise she'd built might finally be too loud to stand in. And when the coverage finally slowed, when the trending tags faded, a single line from a commentator captured what everyone had just witnessed. Entertainment didn't break the table, contempt did. And once the room goes quiet, you can hear what survived, dignity, or the echo of your own certainty.